Well, welcome to our Zoom today about creating a holy Advent at home. My name is Kathy Pittenger. I'm the Children's Initiatives Coordinator for the Michigan Conference, and I will be moderating our time together. Just a couple housekeeping items. Please keep your microphone on mute. It helps keep background noise to a minimum, unless you're asking a question. But please feel free to ask questions in the chat box too. I'll be keeping track of comments and questions and ideas that you all might share there. The Zoom will be recorded and available for those who registered. And at the end of our Zoom, I will announce the winners of our giveaway books. We have 2 copies of Faithful Families for Advent and Christmas. And I have 2 copies of Little Mole's Christmas Gift by Glennis and Ellis, which just was released yesterday. So pretty excited about that. Hey. Our guest presenter this morning is Tracy Smith, and Tracy is an ordained minister, mother of 3, and author. Her passion is helping families find times for connection and spiritual nourishment amid the hustle and bustle of daily life. And what began as a quest to help her own family has provided valuable insight for thousands of others. She believes faith practices should be fun, easy to fit into daily life, and accessible to all. And Tracy is the author of 3 books: Faithful Families, Creating Sacred Moments at Home, Prayers for Faithful Families, Everyday Prayers for Everyday Life, and Faithful Families for Advent and Christmas, 100 Ways to Make this Season Sacred. And I was on Tracy's launch team for Everyday Prayers, so that was really fun to get to be promoting that. You all know that I love Tracy's books and I share them all the time. But before we get started, let's begin with prayer. Gracious God, thank you for this day when we can come together from many places to learn and think about Advent and Christmas. Be with us during our time. May our technology be kind and smooth, and may we hear your voice in our midst. Guide Tracy as our presenter and give her the words and focus to lead us well. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
So excited that Tracy's joining us.
Thank you.
Take over. Yeah, thanks, Tracy.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Kathy. So I just have 2 quick housekeeping things. One, I will not be monitoring the chat, so I won't see it unless maybe at the very end. So if you have a question, direct it to Kathy. And I did leave some time for questions at the end, but then please put in the chat if something wacky happens, like my voice cuts out or I freeze or something. I might not know that, so just put that in the chat and then we'll let Kathy take care of that. And then second, if you want to either switch your view to speaker view, or if you go up to the 3 little dots in the corner, you can go down to pin video, then you can see me a little bigger rather than just in a little box. I'm going to be doing a couple things that I'll be holding up, but I'm not really doing a lot of screen sharing or PowerPoints or anything. We're going to go with the flow, see how the conversation goes. If we have time for breakout sessions, I would love to be able to do that, to break you out for your own ideas and bring you back together. We may or may not have time depending on how it goes, but I love doing groups like this. Let me back it up a little bit and introduce myself a little bit more. But when I was writing the book that we're going to be talking about today, or the themes of Advent, it was actually groups like this and the launch team and people that I talked to that really helped me to form it and to structure it in a way that was useful, that I think made it much better than my original idea. So these types of events are so exciting for me because really this is where I get to hear how things are working, what's not working. So if we have that time to interact, I would love it. But I also know we have some work to do, so we want to get that done too. We want to get ready for Advent. So as Kathy said, I am an ordained minister and an author and a mom, and my happy place, my favorite part of my vocation is when all of those things come together in this kind of nice intersection. That's how I started with family. Faith and family was when I had my first child and I was on my maternity leave and thinking about how did I want to raise this child in faith, and what sorts of ideas did I want him to grow up with? And then I started researching it, connecting with others, and it kind of became an unexpected career path for me. So it's a joy. I love it. It's my favorite thing. And I do speaking on a lot of faith and family things, but the kind of my happiest, deepest expertise, if you want to call it that, is with faith at home. So we'll talk about faith at home for Advent. I think that's one of the crucial things to be talking about this year, especially since we will be having to do faith at home. So to just kind of give you a guide of where I'm going, I'm going to talk a little bit about Advent intentions, and then go through lots and lots of ideas for you kind of through that lens of Advent intentions. And then if we have time for a breakout, we'll do a breakout room. And then I want to talk a little bit about trauma and trauma response, just because of what's happening right now with COVID. And then we'll end with some question and answer. So let's get going. All right. So first, I wanted to talk about setting an Advent intention. And this is a practice that I put in the Advent book, Faithful Families for Advent and Christmas. But I think it's important for us to do as leaders as well. So whether you're a pastor or a parent or a volunteer or a children's ministry leader, I want us to just take a second to think about what is our Advent intention for our families or for our ministry or for our church, whoever you're trying to, be the cruise director for this Advent. What is your Advent intention? And I think it's important to think about, how are we going to focus that down? So I'm going to give you 4 ideas of what your Advent intention might be for your congregation and your people, but it might be something else. You know your people better than anybody else. So these are just 4 that I was thinking about that might resonate with you for your congregations and your people. So the first might be a mission focus. You might say, 2020 Advent, I want us to drill down deep into mission. It's a time when there's a lot of need in the world. We need to get outside of ourselves and really have this Advent be a focus on mission. You might say, this year is going to be an Advent, a faith at home Advent. And we're going to pour as many resources as we can into really trying to help our families connect where we drill down into it so that for years to come, the traditions that we help our families establish, they'll be able to have. Maybe you want this year to be an Advent where you're focusing on healing and grief and lament and trying to work through some of the challenges presented by COVID. So maybe you'll say, this Advent, we are going to take away all the glitz and the glitter and the running around, and we're going to focus on healing and wholeness and health and wellness. That's a 3rd intention you might choose. And then the 4th that I thought of is maybe you want to be anchored in the Advent values this year, the ones that we traditionally use with the Advent wreath of faith, hope, joy, and love, or peace, hope, joy, and love. Maybe faith is in our church, we do faith on Christmas Eve. So each of those, you could find a chapter in the Faithful Families for Advent and Christmas that you could use. And so again, the point of picking an intention is to try and say, by doing this, we're not going to do all of these other things. There's so much out there. There's so many resources. There's so many ways you could go. And I think children's ministers and kind of creative pastors are famous for this. You know, we run around and do all sorts of things, and we get spread so thin. So, you know, you don't have to come up with your plan of attack today, but maybe that'll get your wheels churning to think about what is our focus for this year. One of the TV shows that just came out on Netflix over the last couple of months is a show called The Home Edit. Has anybody seen it? Have you seen it? I kind of wave if you've seen it. So what it is basically these two women, and they have this business where they go in and organize like people's closets or their basements or whatever. And they're like celebrities, or really like kind of big spaces. But then at the end, they have this beautifully organized space. And I was thinking about that show. I was also thinking about design principles and how beautiful design, if you think about all the logos that you know and love, they're the most simple. And that's one of the philosophies behind all of my writing and work. And it's something that's very hard to do, right? It's hard to make things simple and elegant. Things that look effortless actually take a lot of time and thought, right? So I want you to think about that and to anchor yourselves in it as you go into this Advent, that what we're going to create this year is going to be very thoughtful, but it's going to be very minimalist and very scaled down. So one of the things that, you know, I like to share when I'm on calls like this for Advent is that, you know, the publisher really pushed for this book to be called 100 Ways to Make the Season Sacred, because there is 100 things in there. And I was fine with it because it does grab you and makes you think like, ooh, 100 ways. But I really don't believe that you need 100 ways to make the season sacred. I think you need like 3. So pick and choose and be as elegant as you can. So I know we want lots of ideas, right? We came for ideas and we want lots of ideas. So I'm going to give you a bunch of ideas, but first I want to give you one idea in each of those intentions. So I think that if you walked away with the intention and one idea, that might be all you need. And I'm not kidding. But I'm going to give you a bunch of ideas because that's what we do. And then you can jot them down and share them with your colleagues, or use them in a different season, or use them in another time. But I want to give you one idea for each of these. And I can't remember if I wrote it in this book. I'm definitely going to write it in the next book, that so many of my ideas, they're like recipes that have come from others. I did not generate every single idea in this book. I curated a lot of them from things like this, where people told me what they're doing and told me what they're excited about. So this first idea, which wasn't in this book, which I was thinking about it this morning, like, oh, I think I just forgot to put it in this book because it's a great idea. It came from a colleague. And this is if you had a mission focus. So if you had a mission focus, you could do what she called fill the stable. And so the fill the stable, my congregation did this 2 years ago, and we're doing it this year. For fill the stable, you say, what did the Holy Family need for each of the 4 weeks? What did the Holy Family need to keep warm on their journey? And so for the first week, we're going to bring in hats and gloves for, you know, children that need them. The second week, what did the Holy Family need to eat? Or I can't remember if we did eat or keep themselves clean. I think we might be doing keep themselves clean because we wanted to get hygiene products to our food pantry. You know, the third week, so it's like, what did they eat? What did they use to keep warm? How did they keep themselves clean? And then the fourth week, because the baby's born, what did the baby need? We'll be collecting diapers and formula. And so you just made a big stable out of cardboard. And this year they want to put it outside because they want the community to fill it up. And then they said, we don't even care if, you know, people that need the stuff just grab it right out of the stable, right? And we'll maybe bring some of the stuff in so that it all doesn't walk away, but we don't really care if it does. We'll just have this stable outside. And that would be an interesting mission focus for your Advent. The second one, if you chose a faith at home for your theme, I want to show you these Advent boxes. If you follow my email lists and follow me, you've probably already seen this, but I'll go through it pretty quickly. And so what I did is made a shoebox and just wrapped it up and then put in the materials that you need for different faith at home activities. And then I wrote the page number in the book to refer to. So this is red and green. And I know the pastors among us might feel a little bristly about using red and green because it's not technically liturgically appropriate during Advent. So if you want to be liturgically, you know, pure, you could do blue and white or purple and white. But it just says, make a paper chain Advent calendar, see page 8. You know, so you have the strips already cut out. If you wanted to be crazy and just give them absolutely everything, give them some tape too, so they don't have to go looking for tape. Paper chain Advent calendar. This one is some hot chocolate, and there's a little card on the front that says, do gratitude, hot chocolate gratitude party, and then the page number is for that. That's something that was in my first book that carried on to this one. I was trying to do, here it is. I was looking for my hot chocolate note. The third one is tell the story of the candy canes, see page 19. So these are candy canes. The candy cane story, I don't know if you as youth or children's people, there's one that's the red and represents the blood of Jesus. I have very strong feelings about that and I don't like it. So this is the story where the candy cane represents the shepherd's crook. So that's the one. So tell the story of the candy cane, see page 19. This one is just simply 4 little battery operated candles, and it says make an Advent wreath, see page 10. Also use the big candle for Christmas Eve, see page 78. You could also add in a bigger candle. I did not for this one. And then this is some muffin mix. It says say a prayer for the gift of being together on Christmas morning, see page 184. So if you do this idea, I've already been talking to lots of people who are doing this idea because I'm encouraging them to do it and to put the book in there. I know Kathy had talked about your group having little mini grants available maybe for $250. If you applied for a grant like that and got it, you'd be able to get probably enough books for your people and then the supplies that you would need to make your boxes. A couple of suggestions. I showed you 5 things. I think that's your limit. Don't go crazy giving people more than 5 things for Advent. And you might even pick different ones. You might even pick like a Christmas tree blessing as one of them and put that in there and just put that as a card. I think, you know, families are so overwhelmed. And I've been telling this story recently about how one of my children who's autistic has been doing lots of therapy remotely. And the therapist is just amazing. One of the therapists who does OT with him is just so enthusiastic and so wonderful. And she clearly spends so much time preparing for each lesson. But then she'll send me these lesson plans and she'll say, okay, Mrs. Smith, if you could just get a few things for our lesson. We're going to need some Play-Doh, some salad tongs, 10 Q-tips, a cut, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, it feels overwhelming. So if we don't really want to do that to our families. We want to either give them the materials that they'll need or really pare it down. I've heard stories of people during this COVID time doing things like this and then feeling extremely disappointed saying like the families aren't doing it. And, you know, I think there's a couple of things you can do to kind of bypass that. One, again, is to make them as absolutely simple as possible. Just read this card when you put up your Christmas tree. Just put one of these links on the chain every day. And then if there's a way to have people to do things separately but together, think about that. So if you want to say, okay, everybody, when you bless your Christmas tree, text me a picture and we're going to make a board of it, or take a picture of your Advent chains as you're doing it. Or the other option that I think is a good one is if you have some kind of a connection point in person, say you have drive-by church or you are meeting socially distant in some way, you could roll these out one week at a time, and just give this 1 week, and then just give the hot chocolate 1 week. Or you could try and do them together on Zoom. Let's get together and have a hot chocolate gratitude party. All you need to do is bring your hot chocolate, and we will talk about the things we're thankful for 15 minutes or 5 minutes, and then we'll get on. So that's for a Faith at Home, focus. There's obviously tons of other ideas in my book. Those are just a few that I picked out. If you wanted to do a healing sort of theme for Advent, if you wanted your theme to be about trying to wait for the Christ child in the midst of all of this craziness of COVID, I think for all of these themes, but for this one especially, one of the things that you might spend some time thinking about is how can the things that we're being forced to do now, how can they become a spiritual feature, not a bug, right? How can the fact that we can't have parties and we can't have all the people in our house, how can this be an opportunity to grow spiritually? I'm thinking of a book like Barbara Brown Taylor's Learning to Walk in the Dark. It would take some doing to kind of adapt that for kids, but she has some very practical spiritual practices in there about going outside at night and looking up at the stars, or taking everything out of your closet and going into your closet and making it a prayer space. So I think of those kinds of things. There's a couple of, I think we did chapter for difficult times in here, or if it's woven in, chapter 7, difficult moments. So there's spiritual practices for difficult moments and prayers for difficult moments. So you would maybe focus on those if you were going to do that. Also, if you happen to have my first book, Faithful Families, there's a couple of specific practices related to trauma that you might want to roll out in this time. So also, if you want to do a longest night service, something like that. But again, pick your theme. Don't do a longest night service and this and this and this and this. Then the fourth Advent intention that you might set for your people is the Advent values of peace, hope, joy, and love. And there's different activities that you can do related to each one, or you might decide to make the Advent candles your focus. One of the things that we're going to do in our church is we've had this tradition of we have a recorded service and then we come together for a virtual coffee hour on Zoom. So we're going to make sure in the month of November that everybody has, whether it's battery operated candles or they have an Advent wreath, or we're going to make sure that everybody has Advent wreath. And then each week when we get together for those Zooms, we'll have the liturgy for the Advent candle, and then we'll all light them together at home. So again, it's like an at home but together opportunity. That's a simple theme that we've had. If you use that, there's so many resources for preaching and teaching around those four Advent values. I think that would be a really great focus. So we're doing great on time. So I'm going to also fly through a few other ideas because Kathy said, we want ideas. So, but again, I offer them with trepidation because you're not supposed to be doing all of these. You're supposed to pick. One of the things that I think is a brilliant workaround and hack for Advent and Easter time, although Easter is more complicated, is to make a book, a children's book, use that an anchor or your center. So I have, I'm going to email Kathy a very simple resource sheet, and it has a link to this on my website, but, and links to some books that I recommend. That would be another great way to use your mini grant, could be to get a little mini library established of Advent books for you to use for years to come. I think you can use an Advent book as an anchor, or Christmas book as an anchor. And I'm talking about like any Christmas book that you have, Glennis's book, or, you know, Song of the Stars, or, you know, books about the Magi's journey, any book that you resonate with, that you love, to use it, because your work is done. We've built Christmas pageants out of Advent books in my church before, where we just give each person a line from the book and we read it together. You can have a story time where everybody brings their jammies and hot cocoa and you just read the book. Got to be careful, as speaking with my author hat on, be careful if you're going to put those on YouTube to check with publishers first. But I have on my website a whole bunch of ways that you can use Advent storybooks as kind of an anchor for, or as an event. And it's not just for children. Parents and grown-ups love, love, love this. I've used children books as sermon series before, and they've been super warmly received. Okay, we already talked about Faith at Home candles. So Christmas Eve, everybody is like, oh, what are we gonna do for Christmas Eve? I said I wasn't gonna watch the chat, but I saw a pop-up asking about my website. Kathy, I'll give you a resource sheet that you can email out to everybody that has links to it. So for Christmas Eve, I think, again, simplify. I don't know how many of you have seen the ABCs of Christmas, but if you Google the ABCs of Christmas and young clergy women, that will pop right up. I wanted to do a children's book about this. We'll see if the publisher says, but and there's a lot of people have done this. Again, like there's variations floating around on the web, but you know, A is for angel, B is for the baby. And there's little lines that go with that. I think I've used that on Christmas Eve. I think it's particularly handy for this year because you could mail or email everybody their line, and then on a Zoom or on a recording, they could read it. If you want a simple way to splice together a bunch of videos, there is a thing called VidHug, VidHug, and it's $15. And for the $15, you get access to the VidHug, one VidHug. I think it's well worth it. And what it will do, and it's designed for birthday greetings, strangely, but you don't need to use it. You can use it for this purpose. And so you'll give everybody their link, then they'll go to the link and they'll record it. And then that little recording will come on, and then you'll get all of the little clips. And then you can put them in order, and it'll string them together. It's similar if you know how to use iMovie and all the rest. You know, you might choose not to do it, but I've found it useful even if you know how to use iMovie and all the rest. It's nice to just have a system where all these clips for this one project are put in one place, and then they do a little opening and closing. So you could set that up for your ABCs. You could also do it for any other video montage that you want to do. Another idea from my book that people have been loving that you could do a video or you could do on a live Zoom for Christmas Eve is to just ask everybody to show a favorite Christmas ornament and tell a story about that. So you could do a VidHug about that and then splice those together. It's really interesting. People love it. It's something that is anchoring. People have beautiful stories about those sacred Christmas ornaments. Another Christmas Eve idea is to do some sort of a walk around outside. I think this is what we're going to do for us for Christmas Eve. We're doing our video service, but then also having this interactive thing where you get to see parts of the Christmas story, and then at the end take a simple ornament and put it on a tree outside, and then you can also drop something off at the stable because we're filling the stable for our community. I have this vision, my church shot it down, so one of you should do this, but I had this vision of on Christmas Eve having everybody just show up and passing the light of Christ, and then hearing the song Silent Night played through a speaker and just standing and listening to that. I think that would be really, really powerful. I think it would be something that nobody would ever forget. They would never forget going to church just to have a silent night and to hear that song and to light the candle. I think it's beautiful and simple and elegant. My congregation thought it was too simple, but I thought it was great. Welcome back, everybody. How did it go in your groups? Does anybody feel like we're not going to have time to go around to each of the groups, but does anybody have an idea that they're like, that? So one of my colleagues shared an idea that is too good to be keep quiet.
Loved your idea about the silent night outside, but we might have to add toe warmers and hand warmers box because it's going to be cold and snowy here. So
yeah, it's here too. Chicago. Anybody? No. A couple of things that came out in our little group. One, I realized I forgot to mention on my list. It's on the resource sheet. Have you ever seen those picture a day for Advent resources? If you Google that, there's I think it might be your people. It might be the Methodist people. I'm not sure. Might be the Episcopal people, but they come up with like pictures for each day a theme. So if the theme is glory or sparkle or whatever, there's a little reflection, and then you ask people to take pictures on that theme and collect those in a place. I've done that in Facebook groups or informally. People seem to really love that. And then the other thing we started talking about in our group, which I think is worth taking the time to mention, two things when you're developing faith at home with families. One is to try and help train them or work with them about habits. So faith formation at home is really about habit building. And I've accidentally, because of this career path, studied habits and habit formation a lot recently. And one of the things that I think is really relevant to faith at home is that it's easier to establish a habit that is already connected to something that you already do than it is to create something out of scratch. So when you're thinking about these things with your families, to try and give them a cue. And a lot of times when I'm doing these kinds of talks with families, I'll say, well, what's something that's part of your routine? And they'll say, we have no routines. Our life is chaos, And so I'll say, well, do you change into pajamas at bedtime? And they'll say, oh, well, we do that. Yes, we do change into pajamas. So that can be a cue. When I change into my pajamas, I'll say this prayer or I'll do this thing. Or when we eat breakfast. And the colleague that I was sharing with said that she works with youth, and she gave out prayers for dinner times and gave a copy for dinner time in the car or at the table or wherever you are. So which kind of brings up the theme of being a safe space for families and not judging them, because we need lots of safe spaces right now for our families. And then I love to hear stories. So my email address is Tracy, TRACI, at Tracy Smith, TRACI-SMITH.com. And I love to hear stories from you about things that are working well. And I also love to hear stories about things that don't work well and that are just crazy. I read every single email. I don't always have time to respond at length, but I love to hear from people. So feel free to reach out anytime. I can direct you anywhere I can. If I can, I will do that. And I love to hear what you're thinking. Anybody have questions or something you want me to yammer on about a little more?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. So my question is, can you fill in a little more detail about your Christmas Eve idea? I love the idea of passing the light of Christ. We have a million of those little electric candles at the church. But can you add a little more detail around the Christmas Eve piece outside?
The outside piece, yep. So
Yes, I love
I
it.
can, I'll have to maybe, another thing that's on your resource sheet is to subscribe to my emails. And I swear I'm not doing it as a commercial. It's just when I get the things done, that's where I put them every week. It's an
Right.
email called Treasure Box Tuesday, and I put
Yep.
all the things. So the I can flesh out what I know. My person who is director of children and family ministries at the church is the one that's in charge of this. So I will have to get more detail from her about which each of the stations are, and I'll post it in the email when I do. But what I know right now is that she wants to have 3 outdoor stations,
Mhm.
and they may just be one, fill the stable, put your thing in the stable. 2, I don't know what that one's going to be, whatever she decides, and then the third one, put the ornament on the Christmas tree. And then we're in Chicago suburbs, so it's very cold. So we're trying to figure out how we can, either on our YouTube channel or somewhere, have there be little recordings for each of those that people could push play and listen to from their car. So maybe it's reading, part of the Christmas story or whatever. The idea is that there would be 3 separate spots on our church grounds that are kind of illuminated. And then the other logistical detail, since I know we're trying to plan these things, is we're planning to do it from like 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and then have luminaries, on the walk. And then we'll advertise it on our church sign to try and attract the community, right? So 3 different places where you could do 3 parts of the Christmas Eve service. And part of it for us is going to be very weather dependent, because if it's a mild evening, we'll have her or me or somebody standing out there, reading the Christmas story over and over into a little microphone or something like that. But if it's like a blizzard, we're not. So what originally we said, oh, we'll do this, and then if it's a blizzard, we'll cancel it and do it a different day. And then the church was like, you can't cancel Christmas Eve, so we have to have it so that people can at least just drive by and experience this in their car if they want to. So, it's still an in progress idea, but I'll let you know once I talk to Emily and she fleshes it out.
Thank you.
Sure. Are there questions or things you want to talk about?
There was a question in the chat box, Tracy, about if they choose to anchor in the traditional Advent values of peace, hope, joy, and love, do you have ideas for fun kid activities within each of those? She asked if you have more specifics in your book or on your website.
Yeah, let me see. Let me remind myself. There is a chapter on these. So yeah, in the book, what I did is for each of the values, there's like a little reflection. So thinking about hope, and then there's a little reflection, and then there's questions to guide your family discussion. So what does it feel like to, this one is for hope. I did the reflection on the connection between hope and waiting, and then there's connections. And then I have like little family activities to explore hope that are very simple, like draw a picture of the things you hope for, fill a box with your hopes and dreams. Planting seeds can be a symbol of hope. Plant some seeds and watch them grow. If it's too cold to plant seeds now, make a plan to plant later. For peace, same thing, thinking about peace, questions to guide things to do, draw a picture, write a letter to someone who you think is a peacemaker, make a collage about things that are peaceful or calming. Same thing for joy. There's a little reflection, some things to do. And then then there's prayers for Advent value, for each of the Advent values. So prayer for hope, prayer for peace. And again, this structure, this is thanks to people like you who helped me put this book together. So whoever helped me do that, if it was somebody in my launch team from the last book, thank you. So yeah, I would say this would get you this. If I was going to anchor in the values, this would be my faith at home piece, this chapter. And then I would probably use the Advent candle idea, right? And have each of the candles, that's in a different chapter in the book, but it's still aligned with the values. And then, if you flip through, there's a chapter in this book called Telling the Story that has little, very brief ways of telling the story. I think you could anchor those as well to the values.
And can you share, Tracy, about permissions? So if somebody purchased this book, I know it's written in there, but I think it's
Yes.
helpful.
Yes. So what we decided, or what the publisher decided, is that you can excerpt up to 5 practices out of here, but a prayer counts as one. So up to 5 things you can use and distribute to all of your people. So if you've picked like the blessing or whatever, and then anything over that, you're going to want to try to get copies of the book for your people as you're able. And I feel weird about that, but that's also just, that's the way it works for them. And for me too. So up to 5 things you're able to use it. I don't know about YouTube stuff. You'd have to, I can get you in contact with the publisher. I feel like if you're using it in the context of a service and you're not going to go above that 5 number, I think you're fine. Certainly if you're going to use things live on a Zoom, that's no problem. So do what you can to support the book. And I obviously believe in it enough. I think you should get copies for your families if you can, but that's not a possibility for everybody. All right. Anything else? Can you yammer on about some other stuff if you
I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So
Well, maybe I'll just close with a couple of brief thoughts. I was going to do a whole 10-minute segment on this, but we just can't do everything. But just a couple of thoughts on the times that we're living in right now, which are so challenging. I've really started to dig in a little bit into understanding trauma and understanding what all of our children are going through and what's happening. I've noticed with my own child some fears cropping up, fears of the dark are coming back, just lots of things like that. So I think, there is some solid research about how ritual and routine can really help with these things. And so that's just another reason to think about how to train your families and point them and orient them in the direction of doing some of these things, not as an extra thing to do, but as a way to center themselves and their children. I was sharing in my little breakout group that I recently took one of my copies of my own book, Prayers for Faithful Families, and just cut it apart and put the prayers on the wall so that we would see them, before bedtime. And all of my stuff is written from this sort of perspective that ritual and routine and repetition is really helpful and really valuable. And that's why I'm I know I'm beating a dead horse when I say, scale it down and pick a few things, but really you will do your families such a service for their children and for their family if you could teach them to incorporate one prayer with their children every night about breathing in God's love and grace and breathing out worry and fear. If you could teach them that prayer and have them actually do it every day for 6 weeks, that would be far more valuable than, getting them all sorts of glitz and glitter and all sorts of fancy things. It's really about training them to use the resources and to whatever they pick. I think to go, 1 inch wide and a mile deep is far better than to the other way, so thinking about that and thinking about how to simplify. And then maybe the last word would be on judging and grace for parents. And this was part of my talk even before COVID. There was a Newsweek cover many years ago that was like the myth of a perfect mother. And it was this woman, and she was holding out these arms, and one arm was like the exercise arm, and one was the education arm. Was all the things that parents have to balance, not just mothers, but mothers and fathers and guardians. And I always want to caution people, I don't want my work to be another arm that people have to grow. Like, oh, great. Now in addition to feeding and clothing and now educating my children at home, now I also have to do this faith thing too. Like, oh, great. Like now another thing for me to fail at. And so I think, your approach and I really believe in humor as well, and laughing and sharing and modeling, allowing people to tell the stories for how it just goes horribly, horribly wrong. You might have to go first and tell that story, but if you have a story of one of my faith practices gone wrong, please email it to me. I love those stories because I think they just remind us about what happens in messiness of life. I had a reader once email me about, there's a practice in the original Faithful Families book about marking the days that God has given, and you're supposed to take a sticker and put it on the wall and mark the days and just say, thank you, God, for another day. And it worked great in my home. But she said the first day she did it, there was like a level 10 meltdown about the stickers, and the child didn't want to put it on the wall, and he was just like mad, and and I'm not laughing at that. I mean, it's like a very stressful moment, but it's also just a reminder that then you have to say, well, so much for that for today. But the other thing that I tell parents is that you should give something at least two or three tries before you give up on it entirely, because sometimes it's just the day or the mood or whatever. And, that's been true in my own spiritual life as well. The first time I walked the labyrinth, I was kind of like, meh. But the third or fourth time I was like, oh, I see where we're going with this. So to give that encouragement to your families. But I will email my resource sheet to you, Kathy, and just also, this is commercially, but it's also just practically helpful. If you are buying the book in bulk, you should probably buy it directly from Chalice Press, because you'll get the best discount. And then also Amazon is just not able to keep it in stock. They're just having a weird distribution problem right now. So you'll just want to do that if you want to use your little grant for that this year. And then I think I'll turn it back over to you, Kathy, right? Because you have like prizes and confetti to distribute.
I do. Everybody loves prizes and confetti, right? So as I promised, I have 2 copies of Faithful Families. And the winners are Ruth Tuttle and Mary McInnes. So yay for them. And I will mail these out. Yay. And then Little Mole Saves Christmas by Glennis Nellis. The winners are Laura Hayden and Marlene Detrick. So I am super excited to get those out in the mail to you. Yay. And thank you for attending our time together. I hope that it helps as you are preparing for Advent and Christmas and thinking things through. And Tracy, I appreciated how much you started with Advent intentions, which is another way of saying know your why. All my people who know me know that I always remind us to start with our why. You participants will receive an email with the link from the recording, and I'll include the resource page from Tracy and a couple other notes from what we talked about today. So look for that by Friday. Give me a little grace in getting everything put together. Our next Kids Min Leaders Zoom will be Wednesday, October 21st at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. And that will be a care and share time with one another. And I'll include the link to sign up for that in the email that I send you all to. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Tracy. We appreciate
you.
And enjoy your beautiful day. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody. Peace to you.